So, Brother Ash kept talking about this when he was here last week, and I believe he's right. Brother DJ alluded to it, that he's feeling a family being established in this place. And I really feel like this is the next season of our life. God wants to be building that and increasing on that, and that this place would really become a sanctuary for those that need shelter from the storms of life. A place where even though life is difficult, life is tough, that you can come in here and that we as the family of God can ultimately host the presence of God. This place needs to be a place where you come into, and when you walk in the doors, yokes are broken off of your shoulder and your life, just because of the presence of God in this place and just because of the love that we have for each other. And so I don't think that love for each other will ever be quite perfected until we meet Jesus face to face, but I do know from now to then, we have the challenge and the opportunity to increase it so much more. And I believe too much of our love in times past has been contingent upon, well, this person needs to improve. Their love, joy, peace level is down, and if that person would get rid of their attitudes, they'd be a whole lot more lovable. And if Sister so-and-so wouldn't talk so much, we'd have a whole lot more unity. And if the preacher wouldn't harp on things so much, maybe we could be more of a loving people. And so too much of our love is contingent upon the other person. But if we really search the scriptures, we find out that the love of God, it's really our responsibility to grow that love in our spirits. And I believe when that love grows in our hearts, simultaneously our love will grow not only for God's people, but for the world itself. Isn't it interesting that the Bible says, "For God so loved the world"? The amazing love of God it's mind-boggling. It's incredible, the love that he has for his people. And then on the flip side, I believe that love needs to come with a real genuine fear of God, a real genuine respect and honor for this great, awesome God that actually stooped down to humanity, came down to our level, and left his grace here on this earth through the cross and the resurrection, through the crucifixion and the resurrection of his Son. He left salvation for his people to liberate us from the bands of sin that had been binding humanity up for millennium. So we need that love to increase. We need that family atmosphere to increase. And I'm going to go through a few points of a topic that I preached about back here in 2020. And I believe it's relevant for this season that's ahead of us. And so I'm going to go down through here and just hit on a few of these things. The title of this was "A Godly Home That Will Endure." There's no question that there's a target on every godly home in America. And we've talked about that. It's very obvious because Satan knows that he's only one generation away from toppling the apple of God's eye. And much of the Spirit-filled movement in America in the last few decades has missed out on this very fact. We have taken all the blessings of God, we've taken the presence of God, we've basked it in, we've enjoyed it, we've been blessed by it, but we failed to take this thing generational. And what God is doing in this generation in this season and span of history and time is he is bringing Malachi, the last verse, the last chapter of Malachi, into our world again. And that is that he is turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to the fathers. We need to see that in this generation. And I believe what God has been doing in our lives and our circles in the last number of years has been exactly that. Joel chapter 2 talks about a generational work. It says, your sons and your daughters are going to prophesy. That's good news. We need that. We've got to have the work of God's Spirit being transferred from one generation to the other. However, there are missing components in much of what we know in the Spirit-filled world today. We are very fluent in the gifts of the Spirit. We have evangelized the world. It's been amazing. We've seen miracles, signs and wonders. God has been pouring out His Spirit upon cultural works all across this world. And that's the good part of what God is doing through His Spirit in our generation. However, there are key foundational elements that if we don't lay them in our lives and instill them into the next generation, God's work will only come and go with our lifetime. And we will be a byproduct of Satan's strategy to limit God's work to one generation. If you go into the majority of mainline denominations in America, you will see an aging population with very few young people in it. That's a travesty. I am disappointed by that. I'm not pointing fingers. I don't think that's the right way to fix things. However, we need to be wise and take note. And we need to do a better job. I'm not saying we're going to salvage every young person. I'm not saying that there isn't some going to slip through the cracks, which statistically it's going to happen. However, we need to make sure that we are laying the right foundation so that these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, that they're growing up in a godly atmosphere with godly values, with godly principles that will keep them in the days to come. So, public schools and our generation is now teaching young people to think for themselves instead of seeking parental counsel. That's anti-God. That's not the way God set up our ways and of living and our values that were instilled in the Bible, that were written down in the Bible and that were instilled in previous generations. That's anti-God. And so we need to recognize that in this generation. Many parents take the easy path and hope that being their child's friend will be enough to win their love and respect. Parents are scared to speak up, or pastors are scared to speak up. And many congregations are one wrong word away from offense. That's a problem. And much of that comes because there's missing bricks in the foundations of the lives of way too many in our generation. So what are we going to do? We got to acknowledge these things and say, okay, hey, whatever I can do to fix it, I got a trowel in my hand and here's a set of bricks and let's get to building. So for those of you that are young people, let's get this thing right. Let's do better. But at the same time, it's wrong to look back on previous generations and say, hey, you missed it here, you missed it there. That's not the way we fix things. Many of the previous generations taught the next generations with the knowledge that they knew, and it was their will and their intent to do it as right as possible. And so we need to look at it in that kind of a mindset instead of having a critical eye toward previous generations. That's wrong. That's trying to correct things with the arm of the flesh, and that ain't gonna work. So the few points that I just want to skim through here briefly, I don't want to take a ton of time, was our marriage. Well, we need to make sure our marriage is strong. Is the love burning in your marriage life? Ephesians 5:31, for this cause shall man leave his father and mother and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. Christ left his heavenly home and came down and met humanity right where they were. And he loved them. He loved us regardless of our faults. And you as a husband, it's imperative that we love our wives. That precious thing that God's entrusted us with, I'm sure there's faults in our life. But let me ask you a question. Wouldn't you want people to love you regardless of the faults that you have in your life? Isn't that how it should be? And so it's wrong to hold a standard to someone else that we wouldn't want someone having upon our lives. Genesis 2, verse 22, 23, 24 says, and the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he a woman and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave to his wife. There it is again. And they shall be one flesh, two individuals becoming one strong unit together. So this isn't about when the day you got married, the day you said I do, you took the I out of marriage. You submitted that to God and you said, okay, now we're going to do this thing as a team, as spouses, husband and wife. We're going to do life together. And so too much of this culture encourages a man and woman to go separate directions, and you both have your own career, and you both are called to do your own thing, and then before you know it, we have separation happens, and separation leads to divorce, and divorce leads to broken homes and broken families, and every single one of us in here doesn't want that pathway. We don't want that. Mark 10, 7, 8, 9 says, for this cause shall man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. Here it is again, so many times in the Bible. And they twain shall be one flesh, so that there are no more two, but you're one. And what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. So our responsibility as a husband, that word cleave, is this: to catch by pursuit, to cling to, adhere to, abide fast, follow close, be joined, keep, overtake, pursue hard, take. So husbands, are we cleaving to our wives? We need to. This is something that is not heard much about in our generation, where the man's actually pursuing his spouse. It's not that she's running away from him, but folks, we got to win the trust and the love of our wives. It's our responsibility. And although that was established when you said I do, there is a lifetime of working on this relationship that we need to give ourselves over to. And this isn't a once and done, I love you, honey, on my marriage day, and then we go the rest of our lives, and the sentimental part of us we lay aside and we just do life. This is a wonderful union that God expects out of us. and has called us to that is beautiful. You're laying the foundation to begin a life together, to build a life together, but not only build a life together, if God adds children into your family, you become a family unit, and those children, those young people are instilled with those same values. It becomes part of their DNA because it's what they're around every day of their life. So it's important that we as husbands are chasing our wives. The children need to see that. They need to see our genuine love for our spouses. They need to see that mama and daddy have made a decision to stick it out for good. That there are no exits to this decision that mama and daddy made. But that mama and daddy's love for each other is growing continually. I tell you what, the day I got married was amazing. But 15 years later, just put amazing on there with a lot of exclamation points. And I just told my wife this morning. I said, honey, you get more beautiful as time goes on. She's like, what? I said, I really think so. And I don't know if she's more beautiful in her face or probably. I don't know. But there's things that you see after 15 years you didn't recognize when you got married. Yeah, I'm telling you. There are qualities that you see in a woman that you don't see. You're blinded by it usually in your teenage, in your younger years. But after you live with that woman for a while, there are character traits, personality traits, the ways they do things. It just becomes so lovable, and you appreciate that part of who they are. What an amazing journey marriage can be. And for too much of our society, we look down upon it and, that woman, she's just the old ball and chain. And every man is looking for an excuse to go on an outing with his buddies so he can get away from his family. What? Say what? Let me say something. Men, if your wife isn't the most treasured person in your world that you would, if there's someone else that you would rather spend time with, you need to check your spiritual compass. It doesn't need to be like that. It doesn't need to be like that. Our wives can be our favorite person in the world to spend time with. And that's the way heaven designed it. That's the way he created it. So that's a block, a godly home that will endure. Remember, we're talking about the family of God coming into fruition. How's it going to happen without us as families becoming stronger at home? It is nearly impossible. I'm not saying there's not exceptions to the rule. There may be in some rare cases. You must have strong families to build a strong church. After 15, 20 years of being in the ministry, I'm seeing the importance of it now more than ever. And through that strong foundational family element in a church, you get the strength to reach out into every part of life and touch that single mother, that person that's dealing with addictions, this child over here that maybe didn't have parents growing up, or all those different walks of life. Through those strong families grounding a group of believers, I believe through that you can start reaching out into every part of our society and making an impact. But the family's got to be at the core, at the root of the foundation of what God's people are doing. Our spiritual compass as a father and a husband. Man, where's your spiritual compass? Are you able to lead that home? Can your family and your wife trust you? Do you have enough of spirituality to be able to look at your spouse, be able to look at your family and say, hey, this is the direction we need to go right here. I know the pathway that God's calling us to. Genesis 18:19, Brother Ash alluded to this last week. God's talking about Abraham. He says, for I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. Let me ask you a question. If Abraham would have been careless, like many Christians are today in his everyday walk with his family, do you think we would know the generations of Abraham as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? If he had just been a careless Christian, I love God, yay, thank you, Jesus. I speak in tongues, go to church, but I don't care about my family. God's coming back. My next generation ain't going to see this world because God's coming back in the rapture of this generation. Do you see where that kind of a mindset has gotten God's people in a heap of trouble. But God looked at Abraham, he saw a man, a husband, and a father. And he says, I know this man. I know he's going to command his household after me. You want that. You want to be that man. You husbands, you fathers, you say, well, I messed up. Well, let's change it. Let's turn it around. With the time that we have left, let's change. He will command his children and household after him. Men, do you have the spiritual judgment inside of you to lead your wife and family into an eternity with God? Are we willing as men to ask the hard questions in our family? Are we willing to walk up to that son, that daughter, and ask the hard question? Are we willing to look our spouse in the eye and ask that hard question? Are we willing as a husband, as a father, to make the difficult pathway of life choice that you know if you take this pathway, your family may not totally like it, but you know it's going to be right? Every good spouse, every good wife, and every child that wants to do right wants to be led by a father that hears from God. My wife grew up in a family. Many of you knew Brother Rhodes over the years. He was a very strong leader, very strong. He took charge. But it wasn't in a tyrannical sort of a way. My wife never grew up in a home where, you were forced to do this and forced to do that. It wasn't that kind. But at the same time, there were boundaries set up in our world. But she grew up just trusting. She trusted her dad. And she brought that trust into a marriage relationship for her spouse. So with my wife, I didn't have to win her trust because of the trust that had been instilled in our home. Do you see how this works? Do you see how doing this thing generationally, how this thing will snowball? And it's not that the next generation has an easier time in life, but they know more, they're better equipped. And at the end of the day, they'll go farther. And they should. That's how this thing should work. We should rejoice that our ceiling as one generation is a platform for the next generation to build on. That should be awesome. There shouldn't be any envy or jealousy or animosity involved in that. That should be great. And so some of you may have grown up in homes where your family life was dysfunctional, and you didn't grow up in a home where parents loved each other, or maybe they pulled apart after a certain amount of years, and that scar and that wound's in your heart. But I'm here to say one thing now. You have the opportunity to do something your parents may have never done. And that is put a foundation of love, trust, and respect into this next generation that you didn't have. Do you see how things change, or how things could change? It's where we need to go. Our next generation needs to be stronger than we are. But for some of us, it may take extra hard work because mama and daddy, they weren't that example. I can honestly say, and I'm grateful to God for it, there were two things that I never had to question with my parents. I've talked about this numerous times. Number one was their love for each other. I never questioned that. Never had to. Number two was their love for me. I grew up in a family of 5 boys. I'm sure there was always, maybe the little back and forth banter. So-and-so gets more perks than me, or, he's mom's favorite child. That kind of, it's normal with siblings. But deep down, they all know they're loved. And deep down, I was never concerned about that. Now, I knew I was loved by my parents. And you realize the spirits we can head off in our children by providing that kind of an atmosphere? Providing that kind of an atmosphere for those little babies. Pretty amazing. I'm going to show y'all a clip here in just a little bit, an amazing story along those lines of how important it is for a marriage to be intact, and the effects that it'll have upon even little children. It's an amazing testimony. We'll show it here in just a little bit. How about your spiritual compass as a mother and a wife? Now, these scriptures here are not well liked in our generation. 1 Timothy 5:14, I will therefore that the younger women marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully. Do you realize the power that you have as a wife and a mother to set the stage for the next generation coming after you? Listen, Daddy has his role in the home. All right, Daddy, I think it's important that Daddy says, okay, this is the way we're going. Hey, let's go. We're going. But there is something about a mother's influence and prayers that Daddy will never quite be able to rise up to when it comes to teaching and training those children. It's amazing. So for those of you that are wives, that are mothers, you need to take every day of your life as a mother very seriously, because you are raising up men and women that God may or may not use in the next generation. And that may or may not use may be dependent somewhat upon your prayers as a mother. May be dependent somewhat upon the atmosphere that you as a mother create in that home. And mamas do create the atmosphere. Daddy can build a house, but mama makes it a home.
Right.
And that's why you've heard the term, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Well, that's not in the Bible, but that's true. You mothers, you have the opportunity to instill godly values in that next generation. That even though daddy's there and he's giving input and guidance and direction, he'll never do quite what a mother can do. So mothers, you have probably, arguably, the most important role in that home. Those children need mamas that are going to pray for them. Those children need mamas that are going to push back on their childish ideas when they're growing up. Those teenagers need mamas that are going to push back on their teenage ways when they're growing up. And those children need mamas that are going to love them no matter what. No matter where you've gone in life, there's a home-cooked meal waiting for you when you come back. That's the atmosphere only a mother can provide. So, if there's any testimony that your children need to have of you when they've left the house and gone, they need to be able to look back and say, Mama prayed. Mama prayed. I grew up in a fairly conservative home, but there's one thing that I know my mama did. I don't know if the church taught it to her. I'm not sure where. Somewhere she learned how to pray. We'd come home late on the weekends, and most weekends she didn't fall asleep until all her boys were in the house. It bothered her. And in our culture, young people got into bad stuff. And Mama's lifeline was heaven. So my parents, I'm grateful to God for what they did in my life. And I feel they laid a foundation that I can stand upon. They loved each other. They didn't tear themselves apart. And we grew up around the family table, eating meals together and enjoying each other's company, and it was wonderful. And you as a mother, you have that opportunity to create that. My fondest memories of me and my family is mealtime. Even to the point where my mama, she's so dogmatic about family eating around the table. There's about probably at least 30 of us now, with the grandchildren and all that. And the table for Thanksgiving and Christmas meals, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because Mama doesn't like doing cafeteria style. She wants everybody around that table, and we're passing food and talking. She loves that. But that was part of who my mama was and what she did. But she created that. She fought for it. And you as a mother, I tell you what, your children can go this way and that way and make bad decisions, whatever it is. But I tell you what, there's something about Mama's open heart that's like a magnet to draw them back home. Mamas, give your family that open heart. Be that praying mother that in the midst of the cares and the pressures and the stress of everyday life in this world, that those children can walk into that home and there's a refuge of peace there. That husband walks in that home and it's been stressful, and it's a safe place to be. We're going through a stage right now in our life as a family where there's not too many quiet moments in our home anymore. And it's not always per se peaceful when I walk, when I say peaceful, like atmosphere of circumstantial quiet, still we got classical music or piano playing in the background. Everything's tranquil and awesome. Yeah, that world's not in my home. In my home, I'm walking in a place of rest. I want to be there. I want to be there. I want to be next to that woman. I want to grab those babies. I want to hug them. I told my wife, I said, I think the older I get, the more sentimental I am. And it probably comes with, we're in our older age of raising children, and in some ways, you might not have as much energy, but in other ways, you're smarter. I'm smarter at 39 than I was at 29 or 19. And so I notice things, little nuances in life. I notice them more now than I did 10 years ago. And the other night, I'm walking into the house, and it's late. It's after one of the church nights. And so I got Emily out of the car, and she's following me, and I heard her behind me. And just as I was walking in the door, I just heard the pitter, pat, pat. You ever hear that little noise of a little toddler? And I remember thinking, I said, God, I just want to capture this moment and hold it in my spirit forever, because it ain't going to be long. Everyone tells me that it's gone very quickly. And I just want to capture putting that baby into the crib, and they're quiet and content, and they have a smile on their face, and they look up at Daddy, and I love you, Daddy. I love it. It's even though it's busy, even though it's demanding, it's heaven on earth. The moments are amazing. And so anyway, but I can't get too sentimental, because there's a ditch there too. We got to know that God's entrusted these sweet little children into our hand, and whether it's grandchildren or whether it's children, He's put them into our world for us to be stewards over for this season of life. And I would to God that we do it right. We only get one shot at it, they tell me. We only get one shot at it.